Hello and welcome to Getting 100% Board Ready. I'm Julia Valentine, founder of Digital Evolution Institute, and I am here with Steven Van Vreede. And I have to tell you right away that Steven, about 10 years ago, I was his client. And that's the reason that I highly recommend him. What he did for me actually worked. Okay. So here, testimonial number one right here. But Stephen, I want you to go just a little bit into your experience, how you got to help people with this. Just give us a mercifully brief introduction.
Sure. Thanks, Julia. I appreciate the invite here today and getting to talk to your network of colleagues. As Julia mentioned, my name is Steven Van Vreede. I've been doing resume writing, executive coaching for the last little over 20 years. I got into this in kind of an interesting way. I ran global call center operations for a GE Capital company, and we were always hiring, always promoting a very high turnover field. And I was always frustrated. Why can't HR give me good candidates? When I did interview people, why were their resumes so bad? Why did they say ridiculous things out loud in the interview? And so my wife was like, well, hey, let's start this business where we help people put together a resume, interview prep. And so that's how things got started. And eventually I decided I'm going to leave my role with GE, and I've been doing this full time since 2004. And in my work in GE, I just realized that, corporate HR is really struggles to find these great candidates. So working with senior executives and helping them to position themselves in a way to put together really simple but compelling messaging that will resonate, yes, with HR, but more importantly, with the senior decision makers, the C-level within an organization, or even at the board level.
So I want you to spend the majority of time, showing examples and highlighting like what works. But this is pure curiosity on my part. What is your hypothesis? Why are we, as accomplished professionals or even mid-level professionals, why are people so bad at presenting their own experience in board resumes and regular resume? What is your hypothesis?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to a comfort level with who they are and how they want to present themselves. You're talking about really, really strong candidates for the most part who have a deep expertise in whatever their field is. If you're talking to a product person and you say, well, tell me about your product, they could talk about the product all day long in a really, really strong way. But as soon as you say, well, tell me about yourself, then, and they're not sure what to say about themselves. So sometimes having a third party that can sit there and listen to the person and ask the type of questions, get kind of the raw data and say, okay, here's how we're going to message that. Here's how we're going to simplify it and put it together in messaging that's clear and concise. On paper, of course, but also that process. And I know that you're nodding because that's kind of how you felt when we worked together, Julia, was that, yeah, it's clear on paper, but now when I speak with people, I can articulate who I am and the value add that I bring much more clearly.
Got it. So it's really having that someone else look at you and say, okay, you've done these 54 things. Not all of them are equally as important. Like focus on these three and streamline that, right? Or something like that.
Exactly. You got to keep the main thing the main thing.
The main thing. Okay.
Yeah, people can only digest so much content or so much information until they start not paying attention.
Right.
So if you give too much, too broadly, you've lost them.
Right. And another thing that I noticed is that you use like a lot of color. So you really make it like this Mickey Mouse version of it, which I personally liked because it's kind of like makes you stand out. So I'm just going to turn this over to you and show us examples and tell us like what you found, really works.
Yeah, so let me start my share here, and I'll take you through some examples, some board resumes, some senior executive resumes, and some other artifacts that I think can be helpful, maybe even eye-opening to the people who are watching today's webinar. You mentioned that I like to use, color, some different design elements in the materials that I create. Yes. Um, when people get themselves out of the paradigm that a search, whether it's a job search, an executive search, or a board search, once they get out of the paradigm that that search is transactional, and by transactional, I mean I go to Indeed, I go to LinkedIn, I go somewhere, job posting somewhere, and I find this opportunity and I submit through the online forum for this opportunity. That takes away any opportunity you have to be creative, to engage with a human audience, because that document, that resume or CV, whatever you're uploading, is going to go through an automated system 99+% of the time. And it's going to be, they're going to parse the data, they're going to load it into a database, and then someone, usually an HR type, is going to do a keyword search, and then you're reliant on the keywords they search on for your resume to come up as a match. We want to get you away from that. If you're looking to position yourself for board roles, that is not how you want to conduct a board search. You want to conduct a board search through your network, through referrals, through recommendations. And once you're doing that, you are engaging with a human audience. And us humans, our eyeballs, we digest content in a very different way than the automated systems. So you then have the opportunity to present your information a lot more creatively, a lot more visually. So you will see this theme of all the materials here. There are going to be colors, there are going to be different design elements that are included. So let's take a look at this first one here. This is a one-page board resume. So this is really meant to be just a quick snapshot. Obviously, someone who has served as a CEO and president, COO, other senior leadership roles for 20+ years. They could have a CV that's 3, 4, 5 pages long if they wanted to. Again, most people aren't going to read that, especially if they're just getting to know that candidate. So you want to give them the highlights really quick. So this particular person, on top of having been a CEO, had held board of directors roles. So those are included right up front after a brief introduction of who they are as a senior leader. So this statement up here, this whole section up here at the top, is really meant for them to, hey, here's the highlights. There's the board experience. And then here's just a recap of this 20+ year timeline as a senior executive, and then most recently as a consultant with PwC. And so then there's a selection of achievements that fit into a couple of categories that align with what people are seeking for board of director candidates. M&A experience, corporate governance, risk, strategic visioning, the financials, all of those types of things. So those selected achievements are kind of categorized there under that umbrella of the work history, and then a quick recap of the education and credentials. Okay, so that's an example of a one-page board-ready resume. Here's an example of a two-pager, a little bit different space. Obviously, this candidate's actual photograph has been replaced with an avatar, but so John Doe here is looking for board roles in the life sciences space, specifically with biotechnology companies.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit more of an executive profile here built out with some of the top highlights there on the right. Two
Mm-hmm.
times board member, industry board member, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Some recap of the value offering they bring. This is a nice visual here on the right with just the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get into the professional experience at a large pharma. Board roles are highlighted on page 2, down here on the right, and some of the older work history and achievements down here in the main section on the left. Education, affiliations, recognition, other relevant items like that in that highlighted blue area, the sideline down there on the right-hand side of the
Mm-hmm.
page.
Mm-hmm.
So those are 2 examples of board resumes or CVs. Again, you don't need to go into a lot of depth in these, but they should be aligned with, again, who's my audience, right? These are people that are conducting search for board members. What's important to them, and am I touching on those themes that are going to be relevant to that audience?
And it's very modular, right? The way that you lay it out, it's almost like here's the overview, here's my board experience, here's the top things that I've done that I would like to highlight, or at least they're conversation starters, right? Here's my experience. And whether it's one page or two, it goes boom, 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 boom. Like you don't have to read a lot,
You
right?
don't have to read a lot, and you're
Glance at
right.
it.
You're
Mhm.
right, Julie. It's designed to be a little bit modular in the sense that if you think
Right.
about this section here on page 1 prior to the chronology starting,
Yep.
this can be tweaked around based on, oh, you come upon a board opportunity that's maybe in a slightly different space, or
Mhm.
they're interested in you because of your expertise, maybe in another area that wasn't highlighted here. You can switch some of these things out
Mhm.
so that you're speaking to that core need of the audience.
And what is the etiquette around this? So, for example, if you get invited to speak, right, and you're speaking at a conference, and would it be too much to send someone, in addition to your speaker bio, to send a one page, hey, here's my overview. I'm also a board member. In other words, how much, because this looks to me almost like this is a little bit of your advertisement page, right? You're the product, you're letting the world know, hey, I'm looking, here's what I'm doing. Is it too much to exchange it at various kind of networking junctures, or is it strictly, when people come to you and say, would like for you to apply? What is the etiquette?
So, yeah, when it comes to networking, I would say there are no hard and fast rules.
Mm-hmm.
However, the guideline that I would have is that people have, again, limited bandwidth. So if you're networking, the best option is how can I have a one-page brochure
Right,
representing myself?
right.
Okay. So whether that's the initial sample that I showed with the one-page board CV, or let me go down and I'll show you the next one. So Sean Alex Smith here.
I like this executive bio. Yeah,
Okay. So this is one page.
right.
Okay. So you see the visual timeline here.
Yeah, I
Okay.
used to like that because this is kind of like a board bio without in your face advertising that it's your board bio,
Correct.
almost, right? But it's
Correct.
almost
Now,
saying,
Sean didn't have board experience, but that really wasn't the thrust behind this showing this sample. It was just so
Mhm,
you can see one page brochure advertisement of yourself. You have the traditional bio narrative that you might see if you are going to be a speaker at
mhm,
a conference. or you're looking for, maybe you're at a company and they say, hey, we want to put a bio of you on our website. This is typically what you would see. It's a full narrative of that person's career, hitting a few of the highlights.
Mm-hmm.
But that's truncated down to make room for that visual timeline up front, and then this call out box on the right with
Mm-hmm.
some of the key highlights of the value add that person has brought to the different places they've been throughout their career.
Wonderful. Yeah. So basically, at any touch point, you can create something that hits on, here's who I am, here's in general my bio, and if I am on a couple of boards, let me lay that out there too, right? And so it becomes kind of your means of sharing your experience.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
When if you are going out and doing the heavy lifting to conduct a search for board opportunity, you have to be very convincing to
Mm-hmm.
people. Now, when people come and find you, whether it's someone doing a board search, and they reach out to you and say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about this board opportunity, at some level, they already have an inkling that you would make a good board candidate. That's why they're
Mm-hmm.
reaching out to you. What they need is some reinforcement to confirm that, yes, this person would make a good board
Mm-hmm.
candidate. So having some polished materials that you can provide with the board
Right.
CV, the one-page bio, or any other artifacts can help them validate those assumptions they already have. What's interesting
Absolutely. Mhm.
about the decision-making process, whether it's for a job or a board seat, is, people like to present themselves as very logical. We make all these decisions very rationally. Hiring or getting placement of a board role, it's a very emotional decision. It's almost like a buying decision. It's an
Mhm.
emotional decision first and foremost,
Mhm.
that people then use their logic to validate that they made the right decision. So when you present things in a really polished way, you're appealing, yes, to the logic, but first and foremost to that emotion. Oh, wow, Sean's stuff looks really cool. I really like this. And then you have great content to back it up. It just all helps it come together for them to say, yeah, this is the candidate that we really, really like the most. Let's pursue something with them.
Got it. So it's helpful, especially if you're networking and you sit down with people and you say, I'm looking for board seats, here's what I've done, here's where I'm serving now. Please keep me in mind. And then if you follow up with something like this, then it sends a signal that you're polished, you have this together, right? You have your materials, and people can always find that. And you can probably also attach it on LinkedIn, I'm guessing, right? This could be like
Absolutely.
your
Absolutely.
documents that you should really put out there. Mhm.
Absolutely. So including a one-page executive bio, leadership bio, marketing bio, whatever you want to call it, something like this
Mhm.
page here, you can upload that to your LinkedIn profile. A lot of times people get worried about making certain updates to LinkedIn that, well, let's say you're serving in a C-level role with a current company. Like if I do too much, they're going to think I'm leaving and then we're going to have an awkward discussion. Well, no, I'm just positioning myself for board seats.
Board seats. Hmm.
you know, Uploading a one-page bio to your LinkedIn isn't going to generate the same concern at your current company that maybe doing certain other updates to your LinkedIn profile would. So you can definitely do that. The other thing you brought up, Julie, was when you're having those networking discussions, to me, this is the icebreaker. This one pager right here is
Hmm.
the icebreaker. And this is the conversation starter. So here's the initial piece. you start building a relationship with somebody
Mm-hmm.
right out of the gate. You don't want to give them 10 pages of material, one page. Once they've indicated that there's interest and they're willing to invest more time in you, then you can follow up with, the 2-page board resume, or even any additional documentation. And I'll show you some samples of stuff here in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to remember that, don't go too far too fast with people before they're ready. Make sure they are interested in investing time. Then you can, what I call, if you've ever heard of drip marketing, where you kind of, you email a little bit of information, people indicate interest, you provide them with more, as they go through the process. You kind of do the same thing with your materials.
Mm-hmm. 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 Great. So what else do you have that you would like to share? Some interesting formats.
Okay, so here's another example of a CV, a senior executive or board ready CV. So a little bit different look and feel than some of the others, maybe a little bit less color, but still really sharp, really value
Mm-hmm.
focused. Okay. Um, so with Sean, he had done a ton of great things. His old CV, he had all these performance improvements that were essentially in one long paragraph in his old resume,
Mm-hmm.
that no one was ever going to read. So what we did is kind of took some of these strategic initiatives that he had championed and put together a one-page performance improvement type of document that more visually depicted some of the things that he had done. So there you can see some of the categories of initiatives that he led. And then here are some of the formal um, performance improvement results. He had actually done these at 2 different companies. So he kind of implemented the same framework. And so you can see that some of these core metrics within the organization are listed there with the gains that he had been able to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another page with media mentions. So there's really no end to the things that you can do for supporting artifacts, to say, hey, here are things that I've done. Here's the things that I've been involved with. Here's, like the media mentions is more of hey, I'm a thought leader in the industry.
Right.
So all those things become important to presenting yourself as really the whole package.
That's wonderful. And so, if you are just beginning to build this, what is your strategy? What is your approach? Should you start with the executive summary kind of first, build that one page, and then go on and build the media? In other words, you shouldn't handle everything all at once, right? Because it seems.
Yeah, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew to start. My preference, if I'm working with a client, is to start with the board resume.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the main reason is that's going to be where you tend to do a lot of the focus on what's my core messaging, what are the achievements or the experiences that I have been a part of that align with that messaging. So a lot of the work you do and the iterations you go through to create that board resume, um, that helps you prepare then to create any other supporting materials from there, creating the one-page executive bio, thinking
Mm-hmm.
about, okay, what do I want to communicate over on my LinkedIn profile that I have in my resume?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there are things you have in the resume that will, because you've decided I'm only going to hand this out for specific opportunities. So it's not going to be out there for public consumption. So you may have some details in the resume that you would not want to put on a public LinkedIn profile. And so all right, well, how do I rework that? So I'm communicating there was, some value add, but I'm not giving away the number or a dollar gain or a
Right.
profit margin improvement or something like that. So that doing that resume first can really help you decide what other artifacts you want, and what it is you're trying to communicate with those other materials.
Got it. So, how much of the strategy conversation do you have with someone before you get to the resume? Is it really, okay, figure out what is your goal? Are you going for board seats, or are you going for, speaker gig? Like, so is there always a strategy discussion
Yes.
uh, to flash out what is your goal to? Mhm.
What is your goal? Who are you as an executive?
Right.
Why does that matter?
Uh-huh.
And then what are the things you've been involved with over the course of your career, whether experiences, achievements, credentials, community involvement, board experience, thought leadership, any of those types of things, really, really kind of gathering all the raw data um, to then decide, okay, here is my strategy for then creating a board resume or a senior executive resume or a bio that really is going to appeal um, to the audience that you're trying to market yourself to.
Now, if you already have a board seat, it's a little bit easier because you can talk about all the committees you're on, all the work that you've been doing, etc.
Yep.
If you don't, do you think it makes sense to go to a friend who has a private business, or have something? In other words, is something better than nothing?
Yes,
You know what I'm saying? Even if it's not, um, the end of be all but board position that you're looking for, but is it helpful to at least flash out some of your experiences as related to advisory?
absolutely. So if you are, having board experience, even if it's at a small corporation or company, startup, early stage, late stage, is going to be better than having none.
Mm-hmm.
Having some board experience at a community organization or non for profit is also going to be better than having none, although maybe not as good as with a company, a for profit company.
Mm-hmm.
So so yes, being able to flesh that out, because look, there are transferable skills in all of these things. Not everybody starts out and gets, is on the board of NVIDIA for their first board role. Um, so, you have to understand what the responsibilities of a board member are. You're involved
Mm-hmm.
in, visioning and strategy, governance, you know, the interaction with the senior executive team. So all of those types of things then become really important. So if you've shown that you can do that at a community organization, a not-for-profit, or even smaller startup or early stage for-profit companies, that is you're going to be able to parlay that into bigger and better board opportunities.
That's wonderful. And if you are a C-level executive who regularly has to go to the board and work with the board and engage with them, can you also kind of summarize that experience and
Yeah, absolutely. You
at
should.
least do that?
Any of the board interactions. So if you're in front of the
Right.
board, you're presenting, P&L, you're presenting, future budget or innovation program that needs board approval. Any of that board interaction, you should definitely be highlighting in your materials. Now, again, it's not the same as having board experience, but not every candidate is going to have board experience. There has to be some way you get that initial board
Mhm.
experience. So highlighting any of that board engagement, board interaction is definitely advisable.
Wonderful. So tell us about your services. Tell us a little bit about what you charge, how long it takes, for anyone who, I mean, obviously, there are people who want to do it themselves. And so for those people, my question is, can someone search for great formats, Obviously, there's a lot of do-it-yourself stuff that's available. And can people find kind of cool, interesting formats that they can work on themselves? And
There, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. Okay. So maybe answer that first. And then my follow-up question is, how much do you charge and how does someone work with you?
Okay. So, yes, you can do it yourself. There are a lot of formats you can find out there. Usually, they're images that you find samples of. And so you have to be pretty creative with use of Word or some other software to be able to try to replicate those. And I find that most people, a lot of people I work with, even at the executive level, will come to me and be like, "Yeah, I saw," because I've done a series of resume makeovers that have been
Yeah.
featured in like the CIO magazine. So I'll
Yeah.
have these CIOs contact me. Yeah, I tried to copy your makeover from last February's article and I butchered it. So let's engage. So
I know you do.
they're not always easy to replicate. But if you're savvy with some software programs, you can probably figure out a way to do it. So there are things out there, but that's just the format.
Mhm.
If the content isn't really compelling, then you have a nice looking format, but a weak message. So you have to really be able to write simply, concisely, and effectively for that format to benefit you. Otherwise, people go, "Oh, this is nice looking," but then they start to read it and go, "Yeah, okay, let's look at the next candidate." Um, Now,
Right.
the caveat to all this
Mhm.
is you can get away with having a really subpar board resume, board bio, any other materials if you are a phenomenal networker. Look, board seats are about who you know. That is the bottom line. If you have someone who's sponsoring you for a board seat, yeah, is it better to have a great board CV than to not? Sure. But as long as it's not a disaster,
Mhm.
they really want you anyway. So if that's you, then maybe doing all these things isn't necessary as long as the board CV is pretty good. It doesn't need to be perfect at that point because it's about who you know and how strong those relationships are. For most people, they really want that board seat though, they want that extra edge. Okay. So, that's where people like me come in to help them. All right, let's talk through this strategy. Let's create, all the messaging for you and really build this out so that you are confident that it's effective. And like we talked about at the beginning, Julia, not just what is on paper is effective, but it helps in the conversations that you have really distill your messaging down to what's the most important.
Correct.
Um,
So it's understanding, what are you bringing to the table, being able to really prioritize what's really important there, and then saying it in like super simple terms.
yep.
Probably way more simple than you yourself would be able to describe because you're an expert in your field, right? So what matters to us, kind of as we think about our areas of expertise is not necessarily something that the chairman of the or the chairwoman of the board is going to care about, right? So
Right.
there could be kind of different perspectives and we don't see ourselves, right? Sometimes, or what's important or what are we selling.
Well, exactly. We get caught up in usually in very tactical things
Yeah.
because there are achievements that we're proud of. I have a client I've worked with for a long time. He's really proud of the fact that he was involved early on with setting up the platform that everyone knows today, or anyone probably over 30 or 35 knows as AOL.com,
Right.
that allowed people to send email to one
Right.
another. Well, going for senior level roles today, he's actually dating himself by featuring that as his best accomplishment. He's telling people my best work was 25 plus years ago. So I had to explain to him, no, we don't want to send that message, right? Here's what you're going for today. Let's talk about the value add you have brought to organizations that align with what you're going for right now.
Right. Here's my highlight from this century.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So,
Okay.
so from a fee perspective, there's a whole bunch of things that we can do. The board CV tends to be kind of like, let's get this done or let's start there. That's a $2,500 fee for that service. And like I said before, that includes going through a deep dive interview with the candidate, talking about all the things they've done, who they are, how they want to present themselves, and again the type of board roles that they're looking to pursue. So then I can go and create the board CV that aligns with all of that. And then from there, we can do LinkedIn profiles. I do the one-page bios, and any of these other marketing artifacts. So you saw the media page. I just want to show you, if it's okay, Julia, a few more. So this is a grouping. So if you can see Walt Smith here, Walt wasn't going for board seats, but I like this example because it shows kind of the diversity of materials that anyone can put together to represent themselves out there in the market. Walt was really going for disruptive innovation or innovation program leadership roles at large Fortune 200 companies. So we put together a package that when he was talking to the executive recruiters, once he had established a relationship with them and they were comfortable together, and that recruiter had indicated, hey, I'm going to go present you to some of my corporate clients that I work with, he would provide them with this dossier, this whole portfolio that they could then present to these clients. So Walt had this quote that he loves, he kind of lives by, so we incorporated that into a cover page here. We put together a forward with his kind of vision for launching and or running a disruptive innovation program. A table of contents that shows you all the rest of the material that's going to be part of the package. Some infographics that are more of a visual depiction of some of the highlights, his leadership background, focus on driving innovation and business agility, different industry experience, global background. Here's his one-page bio with the visual timeline, his two-page resume. So it's totally different look and feel in terms of the resume, within the same structure that we talked about before for the resume. Sorry, I know I'm going through this very, very quickly. This one I love because, again, this is not him saying this about himself or me writing it about him. These are quotes that other people have said about him, either in performance appraisals, direct customer testimonials, or recommendations that he got on his LinkedIn profile. Now, obviously, this has been sanitized, but you get an idea of how you can take snippets of things other people have said to represent, give people an idea of really who you are and what you bring to the table. Another infographic here, he led an enterprise agility transformation journey. This just helps depict that. And then, hey, here, let's connect. He got his own Calendly that people could then schedule time conveniently to have a Zoom conversation with him. So, again, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning about human to human interaction versus a transactional approach to any search. almost none of these materials work if you are going to a job site and uploading something online and
Right.
hoping that someone reaches out to you. This is about engaging with other people in a meaningful way. And so all these artifacts are just things that help to deliver your message or strengthen your message in a visual, compelling way.
Wonderful. So it's like a brochure that advertises essentially everything that you can bring, your entire experience, your life philosophy, right? So it's super. It could be a one pager, or it could be 10 pages that is super comprehensive.
Exactly. And like we talked about with the Sean's one pager,
Hmm.
with Walt, he can separate these as separate artifacts.
Right.
So the resume separates out by itself. His one page bio, that's kind of the icebreaker that he would use. So depending on the situation, he had different pieces that he could pull from individually.
Of
He
course.
didn't he didn't just start and say, hey, here's my 10-page portfolio,
Mhm.
and dump it on somebody.
Right. 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 It's used as appropriate. All right. Well, does anyone have any questions? Please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. We have the Q&A section here. The one question we had, we already answered. Um, um, I'll give everyone like a minute or so to type in the question or to ask a question if you like. Um, but we will send everyone the video recording of this webinar. And Stephen, I really want to thank you so much because this is super useful, and showing us examples is really nothing beats that, right? Just having a good example is so important. And we are building out partnerships with various organizations that help with connecting to board positions and fractional positions, et cetera, et cetera. So this was a big milestone for us to actually talk about how to be prepared so that you can take advantage of being part of the networking groups.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you guys are doing a great thing. And I appreciate the opportunity to come and share my thoughts and some of my samples.
Hmm.
And the question you asked at the beginning, what's the big thing that people miss or are lacking in many of the cases? And I talked about having that confidence. That's a huge thing. Being um, comfortable with putting yourself out there and then having conversations, but knowing that you have messaging that is really tight and effective. Now,
Right.
whether they decide to move forward with you or not is a different story, but you
Right.
know that you've put the best foot forward. You're presenting yourself in a really professional, really polished way,
Hmm.
and that's important. I think that a lot of times people, hey, I really would like this to happen. But these types of things don't often just fall in your lap. You have to put forth some effort, some hard work, some elbow grease to make them happen or to ensure that they do happen. And so being confident and then following some of these steps that we talked about is essential to giving you that really good shot that you need.
I agree. And also leaving the good impression that even if you are not the candidate for this time, people will retain your materials. They'll refer you the next time, when they hear of something else. I think that's important too, right? Just being top of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's an important contact, um, the worst thing you can do, because even if you don't present yourself well, yeah, you missed out on that opportunity, but you've also missed out on the opportunity for them saying, well, hey, I know it didn't work out here, but I have three other people I know over there that
Right. They're also
you
looking.
know they're
Mhm.
also looking. They could really, you really impressed me. They could definitely benefit from you.
Right.
So those impressions are really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much again. And until next time, thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Appreciate you attending.
Thank you.